Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's episode, we've got a really special guest here, Sharvani, who is going to be explaining a little bit more about applying to Cambridge as an international student. So, as you may know, I didn't apply as an international. I'm from the UK. I applied from the UK. And so I did it very much through the, ordinary track that a lot of people will be applying via. But if you're applying to Cambridge as an international student, i.e., not from the UK, then it's a very different process. So I guess, Shavani, for anybody who's just tuning in and hasn't necessarily seen your channel before, maybe could you tell them a little bit about where you applied from so they know like that you aren't from the UK or like what sort of process you had to go through, and then we'll sort of dive into the actual nitty gritty of it in a moment.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Phil. So, as Phil mentioned, hi, I'm Sharvani. I'm an international student at Cambridge studying natural sciences, and I applied from Singapore, which is my home country. So, yeah, as Phil mentioned, there are definitely a few bits that are quite different, and hopefully, after today's video, you'll be a little more clear and less anxious about all of these differences in terms of applying as an international student.
Perfect. So I think the first thing is UCAS. For those of you who are also applying to the UK who are applying to the US and are more familiar with applying to the US, then this is sort of like the Common App. It's basically an online portal through which you apply to universities. And you might see some references to things like UCAS points. I wouldn't worry too much about UCAS points. It's basically like a score system based on how you've done in your secondary school exams, but Oxbridge don't really specify them in their entry requirements. So even though you'll hear about them, you don't need to focus on them too much. The most important thing is just to be aware of the deadlines and sticking to those UCAS deadlines, which I think, Shavani, are different for international applicants. Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Phil. There are pretty much different deadlines and requirements for a lot of the normal processes that perhaps a UK applicant might be doing. I think in particular for Oxbridge, you do have to apply to UCAS much earlier. So I think the one for the UK applicants is around January, but the ones for international applicants, if you want to have your interview abroad, comes around September and October, which is, yeah, quite early, I would say. There are also different forms that you might fill out depending on which country that you're applying from, as well as just different documents that you might have to get from your school and your counselors and your teachers. And all of this might sound very overwhelming and confusing. The good news is, however, that over the years, I think Oxford and Cambridge have definitely made it much easier for international applicants to apply. And on both of the universities' pages, there are very specific points and advice for whichever country that you're applying from. And I think that representation has definitely increased over the years. So, for example, when I was applying, there was a very Singapore specific page on Cambridge, which gave me pretty much all of the information that I needed to apply as a Singapore student. So the good news is that everything is available on the websites, but I would also highly recommend that if you do have a friend who is applying to the same university as you from your home country, it might be a very good idea to sit together and just discuss all of the requirements that are needed to apply to the university, as well as all of the things that you perhaps need to arrange, just so that both of you are on the same page and you just ensure that neither of you forgets anything important. So the more you familiarize yourself with the process, definitely the less daunting it's going to be.
Do you think that's an exception to the sort of what we said in the video that's going up in your channel about sort of getting into a group with other people who are applying to Oxbridge or to Oxford and Cambridge?
Yeah, I definitely think an exception is having country-specific group chats, because I think my Singapore
Yeah.
group chats definitely carried me throughout the entire process. It is so relieving to chat with people who are going through the exact same thing as you are, because it can be so overwhelming hearing about A levels and A stars when you're not even doing the A levels. So I think in that sense, it is quite reassuring to be in touch with those who are applying from your own country.
Cool. And did you do like IB, or you didn't, like, is there a Singaporean local system that you did?
Yeah, there is a Singaporean local system, but I did the IB, which is the International Baccalaureate. And I did have a few people applying from my school. So we definitely did sort of go through the process together. So that was quite nice.
Cool. Yeah, I think I may have seen somewhere on like the Cambridge Oxford website, like they've got a conversion, right? So whereas
Yep.
they'll typically specify what your A level requirements need to be, they'll also have something which is like IB. I don't know, it's like a 42 to 44 or something for IB,
Yep. Yep.
something on there.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. And speaking of, I think these kind of syllabus differences, I think it's also something you don't have to worry about too much. There are lots of things that might be different in terms of which country you're applying from, and I think syllabus is just one of them. It could be your English proficiency, the languages you take at school, and just subject requirements. And again, do not worry about this. There's often a lot of information available on the Oxford and Cambridge website about exactly the type of information you need from applying from any country in the world, basically. And if it is not, definitely do email the Cambridge admissions team. There's a whole department on the admissions team catered towards international students. And I think we can definitely drop a link down below on who to contact for that. And speaking of which, there's also a platform called UniBuddy, which is a platform that I never knew about when I was applying. But now that I myself am an ambassador on the platform, I understand what a useful resource it can be for international students. So this platform enables you to directly communicate with an international student at pretty much any university in the UK. And it allows you to filter according to the university of your choice, the country that you're from, as well as the course that you want to do. So students from your home country are often the best people to ask regarding a lot of questions about the type of place you want to go to study in, because they have similar cultural experiences, lifestyle experiences, and might have undergone many similar changes in going to university. So don't be shy and definitely reach out for help if you do have questions. And I definitely think it's better to be sure about what you need to do rather than just guess what you might have to do, because things like admissions processes are very official processes, and it's better that you're sure about what you want to do. And when you reach out for help, you often get very personalized answers that can be very reassuring and helpful for you.
Yeah, that's just such a good tip. I mean, like exactly speaking to somebody who's actually been through it before, I think it's invaluable because you can go through the rabbit hole of searching up on Google, but at the end of the day, there might be things that you didn't know about. Like it's the unknown unknowns, right? It's the stuff
Yeah,
that you didn't
exactly.
know you didn't know. And by speaking to
Yeah.
somebody, they'll understand like, okay, this is how you do it. I applied from Singapore as well, and this is what you should do. Beware of this. And like it's just I guess it's also just reassuring to be able to speak to somebody.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
as an international student, there seems to be so much that's different. But I think the one thing that actually is different about Cambridge, which also applies to people applying from the UK, is this weird little thing called the SAQ. So it's the Supplementary Application Questionnaire for Cambridge. And it's essentially an extra set of questions that aren't asked on the UCAS application. So Cambridge asks for this, Oxford don't. Again, another difference. But basically, Cambridge say it helps their interviewers decide which questions to ask. And it's just important, again, to note that there's a different deadline for all of this stuff. So just check it out on the websites. But that also would apply to people applying from the UK. But I think the one of the biggest things about applying to Oxford and Cambridge is, of course, the interview. Like it's different to pretty much any other university that you might apply to, unless I guess you're going for medicine. The US also have interviews, but they're typically done with alumni, and they don't really count for much. For me, I had to travel up to Cambridge, stayed there, stayed the night there, and then had the interview with my director of studies, a couple of other people. But yeah, Sharvani, how does it actually work for international students? Like, do you have to travel over, or can you travel over if you want to? And then also, how do you take the subject tests? Because I took them like when I was up at Cambridge.
Yeah, those are some really good questions, Will. I think being international students, it's often quite hard for us to travel to Cambridge to take the interview, both financially and just with regards to border control and getting visas, and there's just lots of complications. There is definitely an option to come to Cambridge, which is what one of my friends did. And for him, getting a visa was very easy because he was a British citizen just living abroad. So I think in that sense, you definitely do have a choice whether you want to take the interview abroad or you want to come to Cambridge to have the interview. A lot of my friends also chose to come to Cambridge just to kind of explore the UK and see the university in person before applying and getting in or whatever. So I think it definitely is up to you and your financial status and all of that. But if you want to have your interview abroad, as I mentioned earlier, the criteria is that you have to send in your UCAS quite early. Again, the exact date, please do check the website, but it is somewhere around, I think, late September, if I'm not wrong. That is the option that I opted for. So I had my interview in Singapore. There are a few differences that I've realized after I had my interview. So, number one is that if you choose to come to Cambridge, you often go to the college that you either applied for or got pulled into. This is not the case for international interviews. Obviously, they can't fly out like 31 academics from all the 30 colleges from Cambridge to international locations. So they often have this special team of people called the international panel, who are, of course, more fluent and more knowledgeable about international syllabi and things that are relevant to international students. So I did have a biological fellow of natural sciences who interviewed me, but he was not from the college that I applied for. Again, honestly, this doesn't make much of a difference for your interview. You're still being interviewed by a Cambridge academic. It's just that they might not be from the college that you applied to. And it was kind of nice because he was very well aware of my IB subjects and what the IB meant. And I just kind of foresaw that I might have to explain all of this to him. But of course, he had a lot of experience being an international interviewer. I was actually the last batch to have in-person interviews before everything went online. So of course, I think neither of us know now how long they're going to have online interviews, but maybe sometime in the future you might have the similar experience too. And being an international student will give you the choice of having an interview in your home country or in a country that's nearby to your home country. So some people I remember came to Singapore from Hong Kong and Malaysia and Indonesia, because I don't think they offer it at all countries, but you might have a hopefully more accessible option than coming to the UK.
Well, that's something actually that's pretty interesting because I would have thought they would do it over Zoom, but I guess back in the day they would actually fly out the academics to interview you in person.
Yeah, that's true. And also regarding tests, most of the times I think the schools kind of are capable of administering the tests. I did
Okay.
reach out to my school and they had experience doing the Oxbridge tests in school as a venue, so they were able to arrange it for me. And it's definitely worth it to check with your school. And I think if they don't have experience arranging these tests before, I think there is quite a simple license that they can just get to organize these tests. So do check with your school, and worst case, contact the university and they let you know any country specific options.
What was that like? Were you the only person who was sitting that exam just in that room? Because I was there, had the exam hall sort of, well, not really super exam hall thing, but basically there were other people, right, at the college taking the test. So what was that like doing it actually internationally, I guess on a different time zone, but that you don't really notice the time zone. Like you're on your own, right? Or unless you had other people applying at the same time as you from your school.
Yeah, no, I had a few other people. So I think it was like 10 of us sitting in a room and writing it together. I don't know how the numbers are when you sit at a university, at a college and write it, but yeah, I think there were around 10, 15 of us, and all of us were applying for different Oxbridge courses. So there was that. But yeah, how crowded is it at colleges when you take the test?
I think from what I've heard and well from my experience as well, it differs really. I think for some admissions tests you'll have just a couple of people and it'll be done in the college. Sometimes you'll have more than that. I think it's quite nice to be able just to talk to the other people who are applying at the same time as you. You're getting to know some new people. And to be honest, like to see other people finishing the same test that you're doing as well, you know whether you're on the right track as well if you've seen them all
Yeah.
finish. Or you can actually see them, to be honest, more often than not, is that you're all struggling together, which is nice, rather than sort of sitting it in solitary confinement. So that's just the
Yeah,
reason that I asked. I was just interested. But I
yeah,
guess the
precisely.
thing is that when you're applying internationally, there's also another element, which is just the culture shock. I mean, my brothers have both gone to university in the US. I guess UK US. There's still a little bit of a culture difference, probably not as big as like Singapore versus UK. But yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about maybe how you felt when you were changing country? Like what was it like as an international student? I think if I'm not mistaken, international students get 1 week extra, or like they get to come 1 week early to Freshers Week. So there's like International Freshers Week, and then there's Freshers Week. So you have a little bit of extra time to settle in and meet some of the internationals. But I mean, what would your advice be for people who are coming from abroad?
Yeah, definitely. You are right. There's usually International Freshers Week at Cambridge. Not too sure about Oxford, but I'm sure they have something similar. And I think that's actually one of my top bits of advice is to move in a bit earlier than perhaps everyone else is moving in if you can. It definitely really helps to have your own time and space to just figure things out on a physical level, I guess, like get over jet lag and things like that. But also just emotionally, it's kind of nice to settle in at your own pace without having to worry about term starting soon and having all of your meetings with your DOS and tutor and everyone. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think it is quite a big change as an international student because you're not just going from high school to university, but often moving to a new country and, to a culture that you're perhaps not that familiar with. And it comes with a lot of independence and responsibility. And it is definitely worth thinking about how you might feel about that. Nobody ever feels ready to go to university, but some people definitely find it more daunting than others. And this may definitely influence your university choice. And you will most likely go through a roller coaster of emotions before, during, and after your move. So I actually remember being very excited about university up till my final few days at home, where I was suddenly I was a complete mess. I just wouldn't stop crying. And for some reason, like every small thing would be a trigger. And I just felt like I was suddenly not ready to leave home and be alone as what I thought. And yeah, I think it's just all part of the package. And then I came to the UK and I was again a mess for a while, which also I didn't anticipate. But obviously now, nearly like a year and 2 years into my course and being, away from home for most of the year, I'm absolutely loving my life in the UK. But it's not come easy is my point, like it does eventually become better. But I think it is really useful to be mentally prepared that things are not going to be very smooth sailing across the journey. And accept that your emotions are a normal part of going through any big change, but also remember that they are not permanent and you will definitely in most cases feel better. And always be open to new experiences and try and maintain an optimistic outlook even when things get hard. And even local students, many students undergo homesickness. So definitely reach out and talk about your experiences to those you meet at uni and especially international students, and talk to your loved ones back home often, talk to your tutors at university, and you'll hopefully get some comfort knowing that you're definitely not going through this alone. And I've made a whole video on my channel talking about my homesickness, and I definitely recommend checking that out if you want to know exactly the types of trigger points that I had, and just hopefully knowing that you're not alone if you're struggling with that.
Yeah, we'll leave a link to your channel in the description, definitely. I mean, if you could like summarize maybe some tips on getting over like travel related anxiety, what would they be in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think travel related anxiety is just such a big part about being an international student, especially during COVID times, because often there are no direct flights. So you have to transit somewhere. And then every transit location has different border regulations and different requirements. So, in terms of very official things like that, I think be very sure about the documents you need and read up the government websites, both from the country you're traveling from as well as the country you're going into. And again, try and connect with those who are traveling to the country and try and go together. As an international student, it may also be difficult to view your university in person before you join. So I'd actually recommend getting to know it as much as you can, just through social media. There are tons of content out there and lots of student vloggers, such as myself. And just seeing others living their life at the place that you're going to be going to makes it feel more familiar, and it might lessen the whole shock of going there. And it might also just make you more excited to move in, which definitely does help with some of the negative emotions that might arise when you're feeling a bit down. So get excited about uni and make use of the wild and wonderful place that is the internet to get to know your university and the culture, because it'll make it feel more like home.
And as you mentioned, like you joined a couple of the other groups before actually heading out, right? Like people who already had offers to your college or subject. Did that help as
Mm-hmm.
well?
Yeah, so I actually met up for, I think, dinner or like a meal with I think 4 people before I came to Cambridge, because I knew that they also were coming to Cambridge from Singapore. And I got to know them and we decided that we're gonna travel together. So we booked our tickets together, we flew on the same flight and everything. And throughout the first whole week, we just spent our time traveling around Cambridge and just exploring on foot. And now those 3 people are actually few of my closest friends at Cambridge, and I met them completely by serendipity and just knowing that they're also going to Cambridge together. So I think it's definitely worth going as a 2 to 3 person group. Also, on a more logistical point, getting from Heathrow to either Oxford or Cambridge is not as straightforward as it might seem. So I also one of the reasons that we chose to travel together so that we can share a cab from Heathrow to Cambridge, which economically made a lot of sense because cabs are expensive in the UK. So in terms of those kind of things as well, it might be beneficial to travel in a group.
Yeah, that's a top tip. Friends can also help save you money because you can split the bill.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. I mean, thank you so much for coming on for this video, Sharvani. I think this has been super helpful for just giving people some idea of, yeah, what to expect, and also just figuring out what you need to look at when you're applying as an international student. And then when you've actually got in as well, dealing with some of the stress that might be involved if you are an international student, that you might not face as somebody who's just applying from the UK. I guess if for anybody who's just wondering about that homesickness video, could you just sort of tell them a little bit more about your channel, and then we'll link to it in the description. Like, where can they find that video if they're looking for more tips as well? Because your channel is full of really helpful resources on just what life is like at Cambridge, and also sort of what it's like maybe applying as an international student.
Yeah, of course, Phil. So my channel is called Sailing with Sharvani. And nope, I do not do sailing. It's more of like a metaphorical journey through the ups and downs of life. On my channel, I try to cover many aspects. Some of it is admissions and applications related, being an international student. Others is just my daily life as a Cambridge student, the academic side and the personal side, and connecting to my cultural roots of being Indian at Cambridge and how that feels like. And yeah, it's just a lot of things, as Phil mentioned. So if you're definitely interested in that kind of content, please do check my channel out, and hopefully some of it interests you and gives you some kind of advice.
Fantastic. And above all, thank you so much, Sharvani, for coming along. And yeah, I hope everybody else enjoyed. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. And once again, thank you, Sharvani.
Thank you for having me, Phil.